Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Betty Sue, for that extremely generous introduction. I'll go along with the part of being a pretty good sport, but the rest of it I'm not so sure about. I am thrilled to be here with all of you today, the most distinguished group of scientists and engineers, leaders in medicine throughout the state, and I know some guests from elsewhere. And I want to ask you a question. How many of you believe that the best days of science in America are ahead of us and not behind us? How many of you think we've passed the golden age already and we're not going to be getting a lot better? This is a very optimistic group. That is why periodically I love to come to Texas from Washington. You know, in Washington, where I've been now at the Institute of Medicine almost 12 years, I love to tell people that my only real responsibility is to tell the truth. Now, others in Washington are supposed to be truthful, but they have other jobs and other responsibilities. The nice thing about being at the academies and the Institute of Medicine is really the job starts and it ends when you just tell the truth. It doesn't always work, but it does let you sleep pretty well every night. Now in Washington, I've discovered there's a little-known set of ideas. I call them no-brainer non-starters. What do I mean by that? When you hear them, it's pretty obvious they're a good thing to do. But politically, you just can't get it started. Nobody is going to think it's an idea even worth discussing. I'm going to put forward one of those ideas today because I think it's pretty obvious. And it has to do with how we treat science as a social public commitment. How do we treat it now? What's the track record been, particularly in the life sciences? Not all that encouraging over the past decade. The National Institutes of Health, which is the main driver of biomedical research in our country, had its budget doubled from 1998 to 2003 because of a bipartisan coalition of leaders in the Congress who said that we have to do more quickly to accelerate science. 2003, in real dollar terms, represents the peak of annual investment in the United States in biomedical science at the NIH. Since then, in real dollar terms, it's actually gone down every year with the exception of the Reinvestment Act, so-called ERA, Recovery and Reinvestment, which bumped it up for 2 years, a total of $10 billion, really because a single legislator at the time, Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, insisted that he wouldn't support the act if it didn't have this money for the NIH. So it had a bump for 2 years, and since then, it's continued to decline. Are you all still optimistic about the future? Well, if you hear about the incredible advances, the kinds of promising technological discovery and basic science ideas that are translating into reality, such as you've been hearing about through this day, you cannot help but be optimistic. And yet, you have to juxtapose the promise, excitement, and achievement of science against an apparent unwillingness on the part of our public representatives to put fuel in the tank to enable the science to progress. Now, how do we get past this imbalance between the potential, the promise, indeed the reality, and our degree of investment? I believe we need to search for a new kind of social compact for science in the United States. We can build on a tremendous wellspring of public support, even in the absence of full understanding about science, and particularly about the science that affects our daily lives. But that's not enough. I think we need to have leadership of a kind that has a vision of what it takes to invest reasonably in science. And what it does not take is doubling followed by undoubling of the budget. That is the worst possible strategy for investment. Instead, what we really require is a sustained, predictable, long-term commitment for investment that may be directed in different ways at different times, but that the core commitment is there. And so what I proposed was that instead of an annual budget debate about science and everything else, but for science, I believe that we should have a rolling 5-year budget. That means we know what it's going to be for the next 5 years. Each year we make a decision, but we make a decision about the increase for the 6th year hence. So we bring the funding of science more nearly into alignment with the reality of how scientific progress occurs, because science does not advance on the chronological timetable of a year or a month. Many of the projects are long-term investments in order to achieve a degree of success. And so, if on the one side we expect to gain a commitment of public support for science, what's the other side of the bargain? What is it that science has to be prepared to do? I think first we have to be prepared to make hard choices about investment options, because we won't be able to pursue everything. I believe we have to arrange our decision-making so that the most creative science is what gets supported. I believe that we must do more to protect the integrity and the reproducibility of science, both of which are called into question too often. And I believe most importantly, and especially I'm so pleased to be able to participate in this meeting on the threshold of the O'Donnell Awards, we need to do more as a scientific community to enhance the opportunities for rising scientists in the next generation. Now, if you look from 1980 to 2010, the number of annual graduates at a doctoral level in the sciences, the biological sciences and the physical sciences doubled. It went from about 6,000 in the biological sciences, the biomedical sciences, and about 4,000 in the physical sciences to 12 and 8,000 respectively. Over that 30-year period, the number of full-time positions available in universities for appointment in those fields did not increase. Now, in engineering, the number of graduates actually multiplied by 4, from 2,000 to 8,000. But the number of available positions in universities did increase by 50% over that period. That's not 400%, but it is something. Now, why are we seeing this jamming of potential against the people and opportunity in universities? I think we have to be honest with ourselves and recognize that a part of the difficulty is the reality enacted by the Congress to go into effect in 1994, which ended age discrimination, to put it more positively, or ended mandatory retirement for faculty in universities. Now, I personally think tenure is a great idea. And I think the ending of mandatory retirement is a great idea. I think the two together are not such a great idea. Think about it. If the average tenure of every senior professor extends from 30 years to 40 years, that means in the space of a century, instead of turning over 3 1/3 times, we turn over 2 1/2 times. And that means almost a full generation of opportunity is squeezed out because we're there. And if you look at it from the personal point of view, it almost never looks attractive to retire. I mean, if I work just one more year, I get paid for that year. My employer contributes to my retirement. Because I haven't drawn on my retirement, what I had grows. And I have to admit it, I'm a year older, and therefore I can draw out more every year afterward and still have enough for the rest of my life. Now, it does reach a threshold where, for many of us, we say, well, enough is enough. We have other responsibilities. We want to do other things. Universities, all of our organizations need to make it more attractive and more usual for senior scientists and other faculty to do their part in different ways without taking up the opportunity for rising young faculty. Now, how do we thread this balance between not having age discrimination and not having age protectionism? It means facing up to the quality and judging quality of work that we do at every stage of our careers. And if it were up to me and I could wave a magic wand, I would rather see long-term initial appointments for individuals and rolling continuing appointments so you knew every year you had at least another 5 years or 3 years, and it was done until a certain time when you would be phasing out, not because you're not any longer productive, you have other ways to be productive, but you're ensuring additional opportunity for rising scientists. Now, this is not a popular idea. It's maybe not even the best idea. But what is important is that all of us put our minds to the task of ensuring that the next generation of scientists have the same or better opportunities than the last generation to make their contributions and make the difference for the future of health, for the future of our society, for our productivity, for all the things that science has brought and continues to bring. Now, I think the occasion of the O'Donnell Awards is a perfect time to reflect on this. I love the fact that the TAMEST organization from the beginning has brought associates, protégés, to accompany senior scientists, engineers, and leaders who attend the meetings. And I especially admire the fact that you have recognized through the O'Donnell Awards achievement in the earlier stages of career. These are all important, and these are necessary. But I believe if we're going to achieve a longer-term social compact and make the contributions that we must, it will require both public support in an ongoing way and fundamental reassessment from within the academy about the ways in which we each serve at different stages of our careers. So with that, I thank you very much for the privilege to be here with you. I look forward to discussing this with you informally and actively through the afternoon and evening, and I thank you most sincerely for the privilege of being with you at this TAMEST meeting. Thank you all very much. I would be happy to entertain questions or comments if anyone would like to offer.
No challenges from those who were
Yes, sir.
Hi, I really enjoyed that. So having just got out of graduate school a couple of years ago, one of the issues that I was hoping you would get to, so if you can address this, is peer review. So there's tremendous volume of material coming out these days. There's questions about quality and quality control, which are difficult to do. And having been involved in peer review since, you get a sense that we have to find a way to manage the science that's coming through and kind of get it up front. So I was wondering whether you can comment on peer review.
Yeah, actually, I think an important part of an advantage of this compact, I think that what we are also doing in our current model is subjecting every active scientist to an incredible burden of administrative frequency of reporting and review in terms of their science. You're referring to peer review, I assume, of the grants, not a peer review of publications.
I was talking about publications, but both.
Ah, you are. Okay. Now, peer review of publications I view as a different topic, but a very important topic as well. The whole area of scientific communication, I think, is another very interesting, important subject to talk about and think about, because that is undergoing, I think, also some very fundamental changes. I would love to see a kind of review system that actually enabled the reader to know much more about the ratings and the deficiencies or advantages as perceived in the study from the very beginning. But this is another very big subject of discussion. From the point of view of the burden of peer review, I think that it's a part of the responsibility that we have in terms of participating in the community of science. But maybe I missed your main point in that.
No, I think that's good. I think my basic point was that the volume is so high that burden is very hard to entertain by most scientists, and so that affects the overall quality coming out, and especially for students in their early stages of their graduate work. So.
Okay, I accept that. Yes, another comment or question?
One more very quick question.
Okay.
We must move on because we're 30 minutes over time.
So my applause to the clarity of two controversial topics. Second, my point, I was the speaker this morning. My name is Tom Lang. I'm from Procter & Gamble from industry. One of the first observations is, and I'll be honest because people can see my bio, I'm 36 years with the company, 57 years old. I'm the oldest director in our company. There are no 60-year-olds that work at my level of profession. It does not happen. That's not by law. That's just there's no financial incentive for us to stay. So part of the reality is that the economics have to change so that someone doesn't, and I don't intend to quit, I just intend to do something different. It is that there has to be a financial incentive for someone to do something different. And then the final point, the question is, what's your thought around the role of industry? Academic, my father was a math professor, and academics is not the only place for a scientist, Ph.D. engineer to work. And I can say today we have a difficult time, a very difficult time hiring U.S. Green card Ph.D. students in the United States. I have a very difficult time recruiting those roles. And so I'm curious, going into academia is not necessarily the only career path.
It's a great set of comments and question. One of the things that I personally feel somewhat encouraged by is I do see some evidence in many sectors where industry and universities are working much more in concert. And I mean from both the business side, but also engineering and science particularly, where training programs seem to be adopting a much more practical orientation as a component or an option for students through the university training. So I feel that is a very encouraging point. Your comment about hiring U.S. graduates is a very telling point as well, and it really points to the fact that however difficult we may think it is, or unattractive for various reasons for rising U.S. scientists. And despite the growing investments in many other countries of the world in science, it's still true if you are a young scientist in many, many countries of the world, your best opportunity to do good work is to come to the United States. And so what happens is we are finding our U.S. students are competing against the very best of science-prepared students from countries all over the world. Now, I think it's great for competition. I think we've got a lot of issues on immigration, which is also a bigger topic. But I think that's what's driving the movement of students into our programs. And I hope that we will, as a nation, be able to find ways to make it more possible for the most talented of these graduates to find their life careers in business and academia in the U.S. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey. And I want to invite you to talk with him at the reception if there is
Oh.
And I'll talk to you about it at the reception.
Please.
The issue of a demographic bulge in academia needs to be factored into your remarks, because my perception is that there was a huge growth in academia during the last 30 years, and that has affected the opportunities for young people, along with the longer service. And as the old member in my department, I resent the implications. No, just kidding.
That's for our discussion afterward, and I'll take that too. Thank you.